Welcome back, listeners, to Technology Blows, the only techno-pessimist podcast hosted by a man with a cold. Me, Dan Slimman. And welcome back as well to my guest, the unflappable CJ Horton. CJ, how are you feeling?
I don't have a cold, so I feel like that's kind of, puts me on the up and up when it comes to people recording this podcast.
CJ Horton, the healthiest person on this podcast episode.
It's maybe not a broad word, but I'll take it. Anything for the old self-esteem.
I expect it in the mail. Send me your address. Don't say it on the podcast. Did you close any Jira work items this week? Or have they changed the name again? Are they called like action item opportunities now?
It's just every week they choose a new name. That's how you feel productive in Jira as you go around updating all your Jira tickets to the new.
That's right. It really feels like progress.
Feels like you're doing something. I actually did not close any Jira tickets this week, which was
congratulations.
Very. Yeah, I can't decide if that's a bad or a good thing. You know, any work items. Worked on some
of
work
the happiest
items.
People I know don't close any Jira items.
I feel like there's a book there. The secret to happiness is never closing your Jira work item.
Yeah, it's like it's 2 pages long. Most of it's fluff. When we left off last time, Mike Cannon-Brooks and Scott Facwa had just graduated from their computer science program at the University of New South Wales, and they were starting a company together called Atlassian. So originally, it was a technical support company. They had a few clients. They would basically provide IT support for these companies, and they called it Atlassian.
Atlassian.
Just wait. It was a Freudian slip, but it's coming. They called it Atlassian because, they're going to work very hard and hold your company up like Atlas holds up the world, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has this idea. Most people skip it and move on to the next idea, but that's what they called it.
So usually that's a warning sign that your software has too grandiose ambitions if you're tempted to call it Atlas.
Right. Maybe don't do that. Right. Maybe do something constrained where you're actually delivering value instead of this. Although support, their support contract business was giving people value. They really liked it. They had plenty of business, but it's not really a business that scales, right?
The dream.
There's
in Silicon Valley, you gotta scale.
You gotta scale. If you're not scaling, what are you doing? That's the first law of business. Law number 1, a CEO may not injure year-over-year revenue growth or through inaction allow revenue growth to come to harm. That's the first law of business. Yeah, so it's not scaling. There's no leverage. They could do twice as much work if they hired 2 employees, but they can't just hire anybody off the street if they want Atlassian quality work. So after a couple weeks of service or months of service, one of the things they would do is write documentation for their customers. And once they had written enough documentation, the only problems that they would call Atlassian with were the really hard ones that they couldn't solve with the documentation. And so they had a flat fee for we'll solve your problem for this many dollars. So that was not scaling. They were stuck with, they were stuck with some. So they learned very fast about
how not to structure a consulting business.
Yes. So one of their first attempts to squeeze some margins out of this business that they had, which had real customers, was to build a software tool called the Atlassian Support System, or ASS, which honestly maybe they should have kept. It's very fitting.
Yeah, can we go back to from work items to ASS items? Maybe you should put that button on the clock.
Yeah, we should write a plugin for that and put it on the Atlassian marketplace. Jira rebranded as ASS to back to Jira Classic.
Bring back vintage Jira.
So ASS becomes very useful in the early days of Atlassian because they're using it to track work they're doing for their customers, and it's giving them a lot of value. It's a good system. They like it. So what do? They decide that instead of selling IT support, they're going to start selling their ASS. But sadly, they rebrand it to the much less expressive Jira. There's a whole long, boring story about the name, which condenses down to Bugzilla, Godzilla, Gojira, which is the Japanese name for Godzilla, and then Jira. So
it's not as interesting a story as I was expecting, I've got to say.
No, it's not. There's not that much. These guys, They're not the world's most exciting founders.
Not great at naming. But they're first ass.
Not great. Atlassian, Jira, Confluence is a clunky name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea what Bamboo does. Don't they have a thing called Bamboo?
Yes. Is that the CI thing? The CI system that I've never touched.
Of course. It continuously integrates software like Bamboo.
Oh, it takes over all of your yard like Bamboo.
Yeah. That's what Jira does. They should have called Jira kudzu.
Oh, man. It just takes over your whole life.
Right. Japanese, not weed. Yeah. So anyway, they're like, fuck doing support for money. Jira's the product now. And Mike and Scott start to find around 2002, 2003, that certain people really like Jira. It has a natural customer base, and it's scalable because they don't have to rewrite it every time. And they talked about this period to NPR in 2001. And the host, Guy Raz, who's a business guy, not a software guy, asks a question about how Jira, he's like, I've heard Jira was really complicated to set up in the early days. And actually, some of your customers liked that it was complicated to set up. And one of the two founders, I'm not sure which one, they're both 40-something Australian men. So one of them says, quote, "The people who got up the curve of understanding the power of Jira became these huge fans, and they became superstars at their company because they could solve all these problems for the company really, really cheaply." But what I find really interesting about this exchange is that at this point, Guy Raz thinks, I'm pretty sure he's imagining software developers that are becoming superstars at their companies because they can solve software development problems really cheaply with Jira. And if the host thinks that, probably most of the listeners to the interview would have thought that. But I don't think that's what they're talking about. Like, I don't know about you. I've never met a software developer who was like, I love how easy Jira makes my job.
I just had a very similar train of thought that I was like, what kind of problems are you solving with Jira? And I was like, well, probably not the actual, like, bug solving types of problems. Oh. Though, I mean, like, maybe if you didn't have, like, any kind of bug or issue tracking before and you introduced something like Jira would be better than no tracking of everyone for themselves.
Absolutely, but issue they didn't invent issue tracking. Yeah. Right. So what I was trying to figure out, what was it about Jira
specifically? That
really was speaking to people in 2003. I have a theory. So we know it doesn't solve software develop like Jira doesn't solve software development problems. It lets you track progress on things. It lets you visualize a plan. But like nothing about what Jira does, or at least nothing about what people buy Jira to do, makes software development easier. That activity, the activity of software development, happens entirely outside Jira, mostly in like your text editor, in GitHub, conversations with your colleagues. Software engineering produces inputs to Jira. You go do a software engineering task, and then you update Jira with data about what you did, how long it took, new tasks that you maybe uncovered while you were working. And if you don't update Jira, your manager gets all pissy. But Jira doesn't help to do software development work. So my theory is that all these huge fans that Mike and Scott refer to must have been not software developers, but managers, project managers, and so on. Planners, like from the intellectual lineage of Henry Gantt.
Chart makers of yesteryear.
Yes, the chart. They're right. They're like, oh, I don't have to draw the charts with pen anymore. That's just fantastic. It makes sense because there were a lot of project planning types entering the software industry at this time so it's 2003. The dot-com bubble burst in March of 2001. So I think a lot of big firms had bought tech companies during the boom years because it was like, you can't go wrong buying a tech company. You just put in coffee and ping pong tables. Profit comes out. Exactly, free money. Nowadays, it's very similar with AI companies, but they're, instead of coffee and ping pong tables, they're powered by Soylent and Adderall.
Oh, I was going to make a crack about GPUs, but I'm done. Even more than
I mean, you can't feed engineers GPUs, is what is what. Not with that attitude.
You can only work at Meta if you're willing to subsist only on GPUs.
That'll make you do 5 times as much work.
Yeah, that's definitely how that
Um,
works.
so I think that, yeah, so these companies were like had now left with big portfolios full of tech companies, and they're like poking with a stick, being like, hey,
Make
be
money.
profitable. Right. So I think what happened is that in order to try to get something out of these empty husks of formerly profitable companies, investors started turning to that old servant of the owning class, scientific management. How can we use charts to squeeze more surplus value out of these chumps? So around 2002, 2003, the software engineering zone was flooded with professional planners, and they had enough budget to buy something like Jira. Anyway, that's my theory.
Oh, I'm still sort of like working through the idea that like which must have been true at some point that like Jira was seen as, this really like productivity increasing tool, which is just so
Yeah.
the opposite of like everyone I have ever worked with on like the IC level is like, oh, Jira's the worst. It's terrible.
Right. It's everything I hate about my job is compressed into, if you had to pick a single tool. Yeah. I think I think there was a big gap between they how the founders sold Jira and what Jira actually did, and maybe even, what they saw Jira as being for and what it was actually for. But somewhere there was a market because Atlassian started getting a ton of customers and it grew really fast. October of 2004 saw the release of Jira version 3.0, and this was the version that really solidified Jira's position as a software project management tool, I think. So the improvements for 3.0 included an overhaul of the dashboard feature, the dashboard being a page in Jira where you can consolidate lots of statistics and summaries about how projects are going and who's working on what, how many issues have been closed, shit like that. None of which is really that useful for producing software development outcomes, but
You want to look at a
Jira Power
number,
users
it can give you some numbers to
want to
look
look at a
at.
number. Yes. It can give you lots of numbers to look at. You can feel like you understand exactly what's going on until you realize six minutes later that your model was completely overfit and you're screwed. 3.0 also introduced a new so dashboard. There was also a new plugin system. So a plugin is a piece of custom software that you can write as a user or as a customer that will add functionality to Jira that doesn't come out of the box with Jira. It's sort of like the software version of a aftermarket spoiler for your Chevy Impala.
Can do things that are even more unwise than adding spoilers to
Absolutely. It's very
inappropriate things.
it's you can do so oh boy, the things you can do with Jira plugins. I've written a couple, and I'm worried that someday somebody's gonna find them on my Git on a unprotected GitHub somewhere, and I'm gonna get lambasted in the media. You could do lots of things, and but most of these things you would do with plugins are like connecting Jira to other systems in your company, right? That's what largely what plugins are for. Like, we have this other system, and like the CTO really wants us to pay for Jira, but we have this other system and it has time tracking. Oh, well, we go on get the time tracking plugin for Jira, and now we have time tracking in Jira, so we can buy Jira. Bean counters just eat this shit up. So one of the things plugins were able to do in version 3.0 was define workflow conditions and connectors, which brings me to what is perhaps Jira version 3.0's most enduring influence on the lumbering data golem that Jira would become, and that is the workflow editor. Have you ever had to use the workflow editor?
Unfortunately, yes. It's I have a whole spiel about graph-based visual editors and their weaknesses that I will not get into right now, but the short version is that whenever you're like visualizing a graph, like it can only get so big before the visualization ceases to be useful. Like
Yes.
when you get larger than, maybe like 12 or 15 nodes, like the human brain just kind of can't like really make sense of that anymore. And so like
Absolutely.
the Jira workflow editor is one of those many of those graph-based visualization tools where it's very easy for it to get it kind of hits this tipping point, and you look at it and it's just kind of like this web of meaningless spaghetti. It's no longer like a tool that makes sense to your brain.
Absolutely. It's not all decoupled. Like you could have a really big flow chart as long as none of the decisions aren't coupled to each other and there's no time function and everything's very like separate from each other, which is not the so let's talk about what the workflow editor is and does, and then I think you're right about why it doesn't work, and we'll talk about that. So the workflow editor lets you define a custom workflow that you can impose on projects in Jira. And a workload consists of a set of rules, which are called steps, that govern the statuses that issues can have and also the transitions that issues can make between statuses. So, for a very simple example, suppose you have a project where an issue can have one of three statuses: open, in progress, or done. Your workflow might be something like issues begin in the open status, then they can transition from open to in progress, then they can transition from in progress to done. That's a simple workflow. Very optimistic workflow about what your work might look like. Tickets they start on the left side of the board, they go to the right, and then they're done.
There's no pauses or moving backwards.
Yep. Nope. Nobody stopped to do anything else, just progress only. I've seen a lot of Kanban boards that people take very seriously that are not much more complex than this, because I think it's just this wishful thinking that if you don't have a category for anything other than progress, then nothing other than progress will occur.
Definitely things won't sit in the in progress column for long periods of time with no apparent forward motion because they're blocked.
Right. Because real world workflows are much more complex than this, and in fact more complex and can be represented with a flowchart usually. But managers, that's a feature. If you're a manager or project manager, you love this shit. And
Love
let me just say,
things. It's the best.
yeah, that's because then it's legible. That some of my best friends are engineering managers. I have no aspersions to cast at engineering managers, or well, maybe some light aspersions to cast on project managers, but it's the workers who use Jira are not the villains of this story. The villain is Jira. Anyway, the reason EMs, engineering managers, and PMs, project managers, love the workflow editor is mainly because it makes work legible. Work as you find it in the world is very fluid. It's a social process. It's people trying to get things done. So like it resists boxing in. People do things however they see them need to do them. And there aren't always clean categories to put all the work items in. Like if as a software developer, if you're told to say add a progress bar for a particular user action, you might be able to do it all in one row, all in a row, all in one sitting, and move it from to do to in progress to done, right? But it's very possible you won't be able to do that, and you might not know until you start working on it. You might talk to some other engineers about what you're going to do, and they might have some questions or ideas of their own, and they'll consider and come back to you. You have to read a bunch of code and documentation and maybe read some statistics to determine how long this thing usually takes. You might hear that somebody else in the company is building a generic process bar widget, so you decide, well, I'll just wait until that's ready, leave this in limbo until that's ready because that's almost ready. It's rarely a straight line from one status to another.
Yeah, and there's often a lot of like, this is one of my chief complaints about Jira is how possible it is to build workflow. This is probably jumping ahead a little bit. I feel like your next thing is going to be about how the workflow builder makes it possible to like build impossible to adhere to workflows. Like for instance,
it is. I didn't write anything about that, but you're right.
Like I have fought many times with the fact that the bug workflow that somebody designed doesn't let you jump statuses. So you have to, like, if you're like converting an existing issue into a bug, you have to like start the bug at like the triage status and advance it that you're already working on, and advance it through like triage and prioritization and in progress to finally get it where you want. Oh.
Right? Because if you make all those statuses required, then people will do all the things that you want them to do, right? No, they'll just move the tickets from the, yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh.
And then if you try to do something because you know it's the right thing to do, but it's not in the workflow, then it'll say like permission denied, and you have to go to your manager and be like, hey, can I please move this ticket into the status? It's technically not supposed to, or you
Technically
can
not
add the
supposed to be
arrow to the
there.
box.
Yeah, and it's impossible for anybody on the ground who is actually encountering these problems to like fix them because I don't have permission
Of
to
course,
change the workflow.
you can't just go around letting anybody do work any old way.
Exactly,
Then how would
deciding
we know
how
what status all the tickets are in?
they do work by themselves.
Yep. So it has nothing to do with all this workflow enforcement stuff that's so central to Jira's value proposition has fuck all to do with value creation, with the building of software, right? It's no amount of fiddling with the workflow chart can possibly result in more working software coming out. That's not software development. So even though version 3.0 was released in October of 2004, very early in Jira's history, it already sort of defined the essence of Jira as a product. Most of Jira's evolution from then on has been an elaboration of this core feature set around planning, tracking, and summarizing work. Judging from the product's release notes from the years 2004 to 2012, they were basically just coping with the scale that now they were dealing with because so many big companies wanted Jira for their project management. And so both the scale of the market and the scale of their biggest customers' installations were, filling their pipe with work to do. From version 5 on, every major version release announcement has some kind of huge performance or reliability or administrative improvement, like version 5, 2012, admin interface improvements, diagnosis and troubleshooting. Version 6, 2013, significant backlogs load faster. Version 8, 2019, massive performance improvements. It seems like a huge amount of effort during this period was spent just making the product keep up with user demand, which would be, normally I'm all for that. Far be it from me to criticize spending on reliability and usability that in order to better serve your customers. But what made all that performance work necessary, I think, was the tendency of Jira to like metastasize to every corner of a company and to every aspect of what a company does, and to just constantly increase its own demand for resources.
Yeah, I can totally see that. There's this sort of phenomenon of like if we can get everything tracked in Jira, then we can uh, we can make everything more efficient. And so there's this drive to like capture your most trivial tasks in Jira so that you can prove that you did.
That's that's I mean, it's not a good feeling. And I know that feeling very well. I've had some managers who were like real sticklers about everything's got to be notated in Jira in this exact way, and I've had other managers who were just like, yeah, I don't know, man, get the work done. I think what you just pointed out is a really important part of why Jira has succeeded despite not doing anything particularly good, because they've got, companies need plans. Their customers need to build, their customers are usually software companies that are selling to big customers themselves, trying to ink like big corporate software deals. And so they need plans as like a sales tool. They need a plan so that they can go to customers and be like, not only are we going to serve your needs today, but in the years to come, here are all the great features we're going to be adding that you're going to get more and more value out of our software every year. However, because the plan is primarily a sales tool, it's much more important for the plan to be ambitious and detailed than it is for it to be like accurate. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but I've never worked in a software R&D department where my team stayed on plan for longer than like 6 months in a row.
Even 6 months seems
Six
astonishingly.
months is at a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, this is
They make these plans out for like years.
yeah, make these this is like even quarterly planning sometimes feels like can't possibly plan 3 months in
Yeah,
um,
we're gonna be fighting a fire tomorrow.
yeah, immediately like that's well this is partially like my team specifically because a lot of our job is like firefighting, but so it's even sillier for us to make quarterly plans, but like every time we make a quarterly plan and then like the next week there is some kind of like emergent fire that upends our quarterly plan, and then we have to spend all this time like explaining like okay this is we're not gonna we have to adjust our quarterly plan and here's why.
Yep. Yep. Well, we got to put it back in the, we can't go reinstall all the pipe supports until we rewrite the plan.
Exactly. And so yeah, so
Uh,
we can't fight the fire until we get sign off that we are allowed to fight the fire. um,
yes, it's it's hideous. But in a way, if the plans Jira produces are not accurate, are not don't turn out to be correct, that's good for Atlassian, because when a company fails to execute on the roadmap, the directors and VPs of technology start asking, "Hey, why didn't this plan work?" And the project managers who made the plan are all going to say, well, there were all these complications we didn't know about because Jira isn't integrated with GitHub, or because Jira doesn't know about what vacations people are taking, or because we don't have a plugin that lets us roll up key performance indicators into North Star metrics or whatever
we don't
the fuck
require
they're calling them
estimates
these
on
days.
every ticket or something.
Right. We don't require estimate.
Um,
Yes, that's a perfect
um,
example. And so upper management will usually just be like, all right, here's a check. Get better, go buy more Jira so we can have plans that actually work.
this is conversation is reminding me of one of my favorite Jira habits, which is endlessly frustrating to like people who watch Jira, which is to make tickets that produce more tickets. So like this is usually a
Oh,
towards the beginning of a
yes.
project type of workflow where you have like a spike ticket, and the purpose of the spike is to like do research and figure out what the other tickets of like concrete work that are needed to do to complete the project. But to somebody who's just watching like the percent completed on the Epic as their main how is this project doing metric, it is endlessly frustrating because the percent completed keeps going down because you keep adding more tickets.
Yeah. How are you going backwards?
Yeah, how is this project getting bigger? And it's like, well, we didn't know all of the specific work that needed to be done at the outset because that's not how plans work.
Right. You can't just look it up in a book,
Yeah, you can't just, especially if this is like a novel problem that has not been solved before, you can't just look up the steps to
which it
solve it.
almost always is
Um,
in software
that's
development
why we
because
get
nobody's
paid.
done. That's why, right. Yeah. Well, Jira's found a good niche because every time Jira fails to produce meaningful results, Atlassian gets more money. And where does that money go? Well, a lot of it goes into flashy houses. So in 2017, Scott Facwa bought Elaine, which is a roughly 7,000 square meter, which is 75,000 square foot estate in the ritzy Point Piper suburb of Sydney. He bought it for $71 million. And whenever I mention dollars here, I'm talking about Australian dollars, which are like American dollars, but only worth about 65 cents. And also, instead of George Washington, they have a picture of Michael Hutchence from INXS. Anyway, this $71 million purchase made Elaine Australia's most expensive house to date. And then in 2018, Mike Cannon Brooks buys Fairwater, which is literally the house next door to Elaine, for $100 million, blowing away that $71 million most expensive house sale record. And I don't know if he was like big big dog in his mate Scott or what, because that would be a very Australian thing to do. But anyway, Fairwater is a house so fancy it has a goddamn Wikipedia page.
Detecting some like subtle rivalry may have developed between the two co-founders.
Yeah,
Oh.
there was a lot of reporting in the last year or two about how the bromance is over. Mike, but I don't want to. it was a little tabloidy. There were rumors that like Mike's wife and Scott's wife just despise each other, and then now Mike Cannon-Brookes is getting divorced, but uh, that's neither here nor there.
Definitely
I do
not
think there's a
related
rav.
to the house purchase. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, definitely not. Uh, yeah, oh fuck you, buddy. In 2017, Mike Cannon-Brookes gave a TEDx talk, the topic of which was, of all things, imposter syndrome. You should watch this talk because it's fucking bizarre. So when he's talking about his imposter syndrome, he keeps looking down like a politician explaining his 3 affairs with Dominican housekeepers to a congressional committee, as if this imposter syndrome is like some secret shame that he's finally opening up to about the public. It's this kind of false vulnerability that drives me crazy, or I think it's probably false vulnerability because I don't believe for a second that this guy has imposter syndrome. He grew up literally jetting around the world, dining with his dad's global finance buddies. He's an old Cranbrookian, which is the name for somebody who went to the Cranbrook school. I don't believe he's ever walked into a room and been like, oh, I don't know if I belong here. But that's what the talk's about. He tells a long story, but
I want to
even
believe
if
that he can have somebody that is raised in that environment can still have imposter syndrome. But sorry, but
even if he does have imposter syndrome, I think he should leave it to someone who makes less money to give this
yeah,
talk.
maybe not the right person.
He gives a long story about how early in Atlassian's history, he and Scott Farquhar won the New South Wales Entrepreneur of the Year award in the category for entrepreneurs under 40. And then they won the Australian Entrepreneur of the Year award. So they went on to represent Australia in the World Entrepreneur of the Year contest against 40 different countries.
Why does this make it sound like it's a beauty pageant?
Yeah. I was like, why are we giving awards to entrepreneurs? Stop that.
Your reward as the best entrepreneur is that you made a lot of money.
Exactly.
What an
yeah. Look how rich he is. So the point of this very long, boring story that he tells is that he met another entrepreneur at the World Entrepreneur of the Year event, and confessed to this guy that he felt he didn't really belong in the room, and this guy told him, "Oh, all the other nominees probably feel the same way." And I'm like, "Great, cool, thanks, Mike. I feel inspired by your talk."
That definitely resolves my imposter syndrome.
Yep. You should see the comments on this video. They're such bootlicking little gremlins. The whole talk is like, oh, look how silly I am. Sometimes I think I'm not great. It's I'm objectively great because look at all these entrepreneur awards I have. But isn't that so funny?
Isn't it so funny that sometimes I don't believe that I deserve all of these accolades?
Right. That's so hilarious. Maybe if you think that way, you should give all your employees equal equity in your company. Anyway, enough about these rich assholes and their houses and TED Talks. Let's get back to Jira. In 2012, Atlassian announced their new product Marketplace, Atlassian Marketplace, which works really well for a product like Jira that aspires to perfectly track every aspect of the work you do in your company, because Atlassian only has a finite number of software developers, but Jira's customers want an infinite variety of functionalities. Everybody has like different tech stacks they need to integrate with, different time tracking stuff, different user authorization requirements. And so Atlassian built the Atlassian Marketplace, where third-party software developers can sell Jira plugins that they wrote and that you can install in your Jira for money. It's sort of like the App Store for Jira. And as of today, some of the most popular Jira apps in the Atlassian Marketplace are Clockwork Pro, which is a time tracker for like how much time people spend working. Smart Forms, which lets you build custom forms that create Jira issues when they get filled out. And then Timepiece, which is another time tracker, but that one's for time spent by issues in different statuses. So how long this issue was in blocked status for this long, and it was in the in progress status for this long, right? So anyway, I think it's safe to say Atlassian marketplace is dominated by a real, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean mentality.
Oh yeah, the time trackers seem especially dystopian to me, just because I've only worked with needing to like explicitly track time for clients once so far, and it was terrible. Like man, just having to account for every this was at a consulting agency. We only reported like 15-minute increments at least, so it's not like every moment needed to be accounted for. But man, it's just really soul sucking to sit there every in your day and be like, okay, I've allocating, exactly 1 hour.
They really want to know how much time you're spending on everything. It's like sometimes it's just like, I had an idea and I thought about it for a while and then I decided it wouldn't work.
Yeah. And
Does that not count as part of my workday now?
that's
If I
still
can't
meaningful.
track it?
Or somebody
Yeah.
somebody asked me to review something, and I read the thing or the PR or RFC or whatever, and then I went on a walk to think about it. Does the
Right.
walk come into my count and my time tracking or not?
Who do I bill that to? Yeah. In 2015, Jira launched a cloud offering. So instead of running your own copy of Jira software, you could use Jira as a service hosted in the cloud, which definitely made a lot of people's lives easier, but also possibly made a lot of people redundant. Did you ever have to administrate Jira, CJ?
I have never been cursed with that responsibility.
It's a nightmare.
I can only
Uh,
imagine. That's I'm
yeah,
assuming that responsibility generally includes both like operating the software and like being the person who decides what other people can do and share.
yes, often it does, depending on the company. Yeah, yeah, it's awful. It's this huge clunky Java application, so it takes 5 minutes to restart, and you have to restart it every fucking day. And then there's all this stuff it has to integrate with. So it's a permanent headache to manage all the firewall rules and the database servers and shit. Plus, every single manager wants to do things their own little special way. So if you're the Jira administrator, you end up in the middle of all these pointless conflicts about whether like customer support agents should have permission to add attachments to issues or shit that could literally not matter less.
Oh man,
So I actually think
worst.
Jira Cloud is a great idea. I'm glad they made Jira Cloud.
Then at least you can have people who are professionally Jira admins who are not also being asked to operate the software.
Right. Right. And when Jira's not working, it's not my fault. I don't get yelled at, which is great.
Can make a stronger
Uh,
argument that you're not a Jira admin than you are not a Jira operator.
that is a hat. Yeah.
Oh.
I do a lot of work for startups lately, like sysadmin work for startups, and that is still one hat I refuse to wear. Although they've made the new stuff they've made, like it's all cloud hosted and there's very little, like a lot of startups are using Notion and Linear these days, which are simple enough to be configured by whoever pays for the technology in the first place.
Whoever has the strongest opinions wins. Oh.
Yes. Uh, Finally, so since 2019, Atlassian has poured a ton of R&D and marketing budget into a feature called Jira Automation. Jira Automation is basically Scratch for project managers. Uh, you were talking about graphical programming languages. Do you know Scratch? Maybe we should do. It seems mean to do an episode about Scratch, but I don't want to do an episode about like the 9-year-olds using
I was
Scratch.
just say, I don't really know anything about Scratch other than that it's a programming language for kids. But
We should have you on for
oh,
I should do an episode on Visual Basic at some point. I'll talk about it.
oh, it'd be fun.
You can define, so with Jira Automation, you can define rules which are activated by triggers, which evaluate conditions before performing actions, which may sound familiar. It's another gargantuan rule engine that people who don't code can use to automate the management of work items. Allow me to read from a March 2020 Atlassian blog post announcing Jira Automation. Even the most inspiring initiatives can get bogged down in the monotony of everyday tasks, like manually assigning work or sending passive aggressive reminders to update a status. It's everyone's fantasy to cast aside that busy work and focus on the meaningful challenges we signed up for.
This is in the actual Atlassian blog.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh, that's really funny.
That's an official post. It's so grim.
That really is like, I guess props to them for having a sense of humor about their product. But
Yeah, they know. The post ends with the future of work awaits. Which just like they act like they've stolen fire from the gods with this shit. Like, sure, you can make automation so it's easier to follow all those work tracking rules, but why in the first place are there so many rules that it's a crushing burden to follow all the rules? Because fucking Jira. So great. Now instead of your manager sending you passive aggressive reminders, you can get passive aggressive reminders from a bot, which I
definitely,
guess at least makes them easier to ignore.
yeah, I was gonna say, if I guess there's no human in the loop getting their feelings hurt there, but
Yeah. And there's no human in the loop to like get pissy about it. If you happen to have a manager who doesn't care, then great. You can just both ignore that robot together. So Jira Cloud and Jira Automation, two of Jira's biggest quote innovations of the last decade, are both there to solve problems that only exist in the first place because of Jira. They don't do of their own. They don't do anything of use to society. But that's okay. Jira doesn't have to do anything of use because once it gets its tendrils wrapped around enough parts of your company's value chain, Jira, which was sold to you as a map of the work in your organization, becomes the terrain. Devs start spending less and less time doing work and more time representing work in Jira. I'm sure you know the feeling, CJ, of having an idea or a perception that something needs to be done or you should try something. And you want to stop doing what you're doing and chase that intuitive impulse. Be like, hey, I just thought of a way to make this function twice as fast. Or, ooh, that's a weird error. I wonder how many users are getting that error in production. But then, because your manager is a stickler about Jira tickets, you have to stop and be like, I've had an idea. Now, pursuant to my contractual obligation to my employer, I will proceed to log this idea having event in the idea ledger, making sure to categorize it and tag it appropriately. You know the feeling I'm talking about?
yes, yes, the I want to use the word spontaneity, which is like a word that you don't really associate with Jira very much.
You certainly do not.
I was just saying a lot of like the enjoyment of like creative type problem solving work is in like the process of like, oh, I think I could having an idea like, oh, I think I could maybe solve this problem if I let's say go add some more metrics to measure this thing that like this aspect of the software that we currently don't have any insight on. Oh, but I gotta go make a ticket and put it in triage and got to talk about whether we got to wait for it to be triage at the team triage meeting.
Yeah, you can't just go do things. That would mess up the plan.
Yeah, you can't just go do things because then this Jira ticket for solving the bug or whatever is going to stay in progress for way longer. And you kind of end up in this like catch-22 where it's like the thing that I need to do to solve the problem is going to create a bunch of like is gonna have like a bunch of work and overhead associated with it. So I kind of don't want to
Yep.
do that.
Right. You can't do anything that would take less than 5 minutes because it'll take 5 minutes to do and 15 minutes to do all the cheer shit.
To track it all, exactly.
Or days if you have to wait for the next meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
it's a this frustrating sense of like I actually could be working more efficiently, but I can't because the tools won't let me, like the process
yep.
tools.
I find it to be a moment of intense alienation where like I have a feeling where I care, where I'm caring about the software that I'm responsible for. And Jira transforms that feeling into obligation to my employer to, identify the characteristics of a task.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like
Uh,
it changes like my personal motivation to solve a problem into like now my employer has kind of like injected the fact that I am solving this problem for money back into the process and
yeah. Uh, yeah, now the impulse, like not only are the outputs of my work uh, their property, but also like the impulses that I have to do work are their property too. You know, when I think of the most productive software engineering teams I've worked on, they're basically characterized by two things: initiative and free collaboration. And Jira, in the name of productivity, just brutally suffocates both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to reflect on like, the intent here is good. The intent is like we will increase coordination between like different parts of the company, and make it easier for at least this was one of the big selling points of Jira at my company, was like we're gonna make it easier for like different teams that are like really widely divided to collaborate, because they'll be using this common tool. But like
And did that happen?
that did not happen, because the problem that is trying to be solved there is that like those teams don't really talk to each other in their day-to-day work. And adding Jira into the mix did not actually make them talk to
Right.
each other any more than they already did. It just meant that at least now, like our tickets are literally like our previous ticketing system had locked down enough permissions that teams would often have like entirely private tickets that weren't visible to anybody else outside their team. So like there's a small increase in, it's like it is a little bit better that I can actually like see tickets that are assigned to another team.
Sure. But these kinds of things can also be solved by talking directly to people and asking
Exactly.
them about work.
Having human conversations that are not a Jira tickets.
Yes. I you know, I I think all of our human interactions should be less mediated, especially
Awesome.
less mediated by software. There's this thing that happens where, because a company is using Jira all over the place, all the teams are using Jira and they're trying to get their Jira backlogs into comparable states, and everybody's on the same agile sprints or whatever. So now every team has a backlog. And if you think about it, it doesn't actually make sense that if you have an R&D department with like 20 teams, that all 20 of those teams should be constantly operating at 100% utilization. They should all have a backlog that they're constantly pulling work from, so that they never have downtime, they never get bored.
Waiting for
What you
work
would
to
want,
do.
right, they're never waiting for work to do, which, like, the only way you can respond to things that happen on short timescales is to have some teams that are waiting for work to do. In the interest of getting everybody on the same page about how work was going to be tracked, you end up creating the feeling that, like, if you're not constantly busy, then you're not serving the company, and this leads to like people putting up lots of walls between teams to be like, well, we can't do that work for you
We're too
right now
busy.
because we're too busy with all this very important stuff in our backlog.
Yeah, there's this like, and this is almost a company politics thing more than a Jira thing, but Jira definitely contributes to it
Hmm.
as there's this perverse incentive with collaboration, where it's actually like, if another team comes to you and says, hey, we have this project that we're working on, but we need you to do something as part of this, where you're almost incentivized to say like, no, not right now, because it makes you look
Absolutely.
busy and important. Oh, we've got these very important things that other people are waiting on. So saying like, yeah, we're busy, but we can probably work that thing in, is actually sort of like sending the message that your team is not busy enough.
Perverse incentive is exactly how I would put it. I don't know. We're always hearing about how this or that technology is inevitable, right? Oh, it's pointless to resist using AI tools. It's the way of the future, right? Everybody's going to be you're not going to lose your job to an AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody using an AI. It's just inevitable. Statements like this always ring hollow to me because I don't believe in technological, like, predetermination. I think the things we invent or build embody our values as a society, and if different values prevailed in our society, we would have different technology. Technology would look very different. I do think that, like, in the society we have, when a technology like Jira emerges, which can like wrap its tendrils around every new offshoot of complexity until it's impossible to tell where the host ends and the parasite begins, that technology will become impossible to rip out. That's what feels inevitable to me about Jira.
Speaking of perverse incentives, that's also like, the product word that's used to describe software like that is sticky, and you want your product to be sticky.
It's the stickiest. It'll stick to all your blood vessels in your lungs. Just get all in there.
Get all everywhere. Yeah, it's
Get all everywhere. That's
uh,
Jira. That's Jira for you.
um,
So for Atlassian, at least, the years of sustained year-over-year growth seem to be over. Their market cap is down 64% from its 116 billion American dollar peak in October 2021. On July 30th, 2025, Mike Cannon-Brookes laid off 150 customer service and support workers from Atlassian in a pre-recorded video firing, which cited AI among the reasons for the layoffs, as you do. And he caught some flack in the press for doing this layoff in a pre-recorded video rather than live, but you have to understand, he was firing all these very talented and smart people, and he has imposter syndrome. Like, he was probably just intimidated and didn't want to do it live, didn't want to have to talk to him because he might be embarrassed.
that's kind of grim, actually. I mean, layoffs are like something that, like, sort of inherently does not. There's not a lot of dignity, that you can find in layoff, but having it be announced to you via a video recorded message from your CEO is definitely like, reducing the dignity even
Yeah.
further.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's something to being able to look somebody in the eyes while they're actually present, who's
oh,
firing you. Um, yeah, that's not how they do it down
it
under.
doesn't scale. Um,
And it does. Yeah, that's right. With the amount of people we're going to have to fire because of AI, we need the most efficient layoff solutions, and it involves recording yourself in Loom and then using AI to make your face look like a red panda or something.
Cutting out all the places where you said or uh,
Yeah.
whatever along the way that would make it seem more like a human message.
Oh, his brow was a little too furrowed there. We're gonna rub that.
Smooth that on out.
Gonna smooth that on out. All right, CJ, we're gonna call it there. Feeling like you want to run out and upgrade your Jira contract? Maybe get access to some of Atlassian's new agentic AI features.
Oh man, my favorite of Jira's AI features so far is the feature that will, like, after you have read the description of a ticket/work item, it will offer you a summary of what you just read. Which is
Great.
just really confusing to me. Like, why did they put it under the description?
That's bizarre. How is that supposed to be useful? Like, I just read it. Even if they put it at the top, I would just read. I think
I
a
would
lot of
just read
people
the
who are
actual
senior
description.
developers would just read the. Why would I want to hear it from a machine when my coworker explained to me what the issue is? I'm just going to read. But then to put it at the bottom, it's like it really just feels like an afterthought. Like, hey, look what we can do.
Yeah, I have not tried any of the agentic workflows, so I can't make fun of them. I mean, I can make fun of them, but because
I
there's no
mean, it's
rules about
not
what
going
you
to
can make
stop
fun
me.
of. But
Yeah, it's a podcast. That's what it's about. Uh, well, thank you so much for enduring this episode about Jira, CJ Horton. I knew you would be the perfect person to talk to shit on Jira for 3 hours about, and you were.
it was really fun. I feel like I vented a lot of long held frustrations about you.
I'm so
So I
glad.
hope it's as entertaining to listen
That's
to as it was to make.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll find out. And of course, thank you to the real heroes, our listeners. By the way, listeners, if you like the show, please head on over to your favorite podcast app and give us a big old 5-star review. Really, really helps us out. And I'll I'll send you a psychic hug. Also, follow Tech Blows on Blue Sky for access to the most cutting-edge shitpost. Our kick-ass theme music is written by Magic Al. Check out magicalmusic.bandcamp.com. I am eternally your host, Dan Slimmin. See you next time on Technology Blows.